my name is Celine Yaffe, and welcome to Talk Law Podcast, a law podcast for anyone interested in learning the truth about what being a lawyer is like. Joining me for this episode is Stephen Wilker. Stephen attended UCLA Law School and is a current partner at Tonkin Torp law firm and specializes in constitutional law. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. It is such an honor to have this conversation with you, especially because of all the amazing work you've done. So starting off, what made you want to pursue law? What started your interests in what you do today?
I'm not really clear. I've always kind of wanted to be a lawyer. So I was one of those people that knew they wanted to be a lawyer from probably the time I was in junior high. Just kind of seemed like it was something that would be a good fit for me. Always liked to argue. And so I always like to argue and present a case and, convince people I was right. So, law seemed to be a pretty good field to go into. I've always found it interesting. And so that was the path I got on, and it's where I ended up.
That's awesome. What made you later want to choose the law that you practice today?
So I do a mix. You said that the intro said I specialize in constitutional law, and that's part of what I do. But my practice, what sort of puts food on the table is a bread and butter commercial litigation practice for primarily businesses and sometimes for individuals. And then mixed in with that is I get to do a lot of work with I get to deal with constitutional issues in a couple of different regards. One, over the past almost 30 years, I've gotten to work with a number of different media clients, a couple of different television stations, some newspapers, and helping those entities with issues that raise First Amendment and freedom of speech and freedom of the press issues. And so that's part of what I do. The other thing I do is I get to, because part of what all of us do as lawyers is, or at least most of the lawyers I know do, is give back to the community and do pro bono work. And one of the areas where I've done a lot of pro bono work is on constitutional rights and constitutional and civil liberties. And so I've spent a lot of time litigating cases over the years for the ACLU of Oregon and the clients they have matched me. And so that's kind of what I do now. How I got here, when I was in law school, I just took a bunch of different courses, some of which I thought would be of interest. And I always wanted to have as broad and general practice as I could. I don't like being pigeonholed. What keeps my job interesting after almost 30 years is I get to work on different kinds of matters involving different subject matters for different clients. And that's something you can do in a city like Portland that you might not be able to do in a bigger city in a large firm, where you tend to get more into one particular niche, and that's what you focus on. So I've had a real opportunity to really do a lot of different kinds of really cool cases. I've also done some really mundane and silly cases, but you get to do a lot of different things.
That's awesome. On the topic of law school, what are your thoughts on law school? How did going to UCLA Law shape how you view your career?
I don't know if it's anything particular about UCLA. The reason I went to UCLA, frankly, is I grew up on the East Coast. I went to the University of Pennsylvania. I got my Penn shirt on today. And I really had wanderlust. I wanted to get to the West Coast. And so when it came time to apply to law school, I applied to 7 law schools on the West Coast. And UCLA was a really attractive option. And I went out and I was finalizing my decision, and I visited UCLA and I visited Hastings, which is in San Francisco, and those were my final two choices. Um, it was, I just really enjoyed the time to visit. I enjoyed the campus. So that's how I ended up at UCLA. In terms of the education I got at UCLA, it was top notch. I had almost uniformly great teachers, people who I respected, people who I thought were brilliant. Some of whom, I graduated over 30 years ago, so some of them are no longer with us, but several of them still are, and they're doing great things either at UCLA or at other institutions or out in the world. And you see them out there. I'm like, oh yeah, I took a class with him, or I had her for torts or something like that. It's pretty cool. So I had really good teachers. I got really good opportunities when I was in Los Angeles to clerk at a couple of different law firms during school, both during the school year and over the summers, and got exposed to some really interesting cases and got to work with some really interesting people.
That's awesome. What has been your favorite part of what you do? What has been like a rewarding experience in a commonly referred to as an unrewarding profession?
Well, I don't find it an unrewarding profession. I'm one of those lawyers who really likes what he does.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, there are days that are mundane where all I do is spend time looking at documents and responding to emails. But obviously, I mean, what gets me jazzed is going to trial. What gets me jazzed is arguing an appeal, and I get to do both of those. And I've gotten to argue appeals in a lot of different courts, including the Supreme Court, and that was an opportunity that was like hitting the lottery. And so it's if you don't want to do that, if you don't want the spotlight and have the opportunity to present your argument, maybe you shouldn't do what I did. Maybe there are other things you can do in law. I like public speaking. I'm not afraid of standing up and answering questions. So I like the give and take of appellate argument. I like the pace and just to give it the back and forth of a trial where you're sort of reacting and responding on the spot to things you didn't necessarily expect. A witness says something that you weren't expecting, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, and you have to adjust. And that's the fun of it.
The topic of your Supreme Court case, this is kind of like a question. What has been the most interesting case you've done? Would you refer to the Supreme Court case?
Well, it was certainly the most. It was a very interesting case. Not only did I get to argue at the Supreme Court, I got to argue a First Amendment case at the Supreme Court against the Secret Service.
Mhm.
That's pretty cool. We lost because we were suing the Secret Service, and it's hard to sue the Secret Service. But it was a really interesting and it was a really rewarding experience. And there are, obviously, if I wanted to do that full time, I'd have to be a lawyer and hang out in Washington D.C. probably, and build that kind of appellate practice. But to get to do it from my practice in Portland was pretty cool. And for a firm that's less than 100 lawyers, 3 of us have argued at the Supreme Court. So I think that's pretty cool.
That's amazing. Would you be able to walk us through any of your cases that you find super interesting or rewarding?
It's not rewarding might not be the right word. I mean, I would say that I find that most cases are interesting and challenging. The process, rewarding is just not the right word because it's rare. There are times you get a slam dunk and you win and you get everything you asked for, and that feels really good. But even though that's rewarding, it's actually not always the most interesting because if you get that, it's probably because you should have gotten it. what's more rewarding is, in some ways, is I tried a fraud case about 10 years ago, and um, and there was a lot of back and forth allegations of, of things, um, and we convinced the court in that case that our clients had not done anything inappropriate or wrong, and they were looking at millions of dollars in damages potentially being awarded against them, and instead we didn't pay anything, and we got a judgment for a couple $1,000,000. That was super rewarding for them. Winning the case was rewarding. It was a super interesting case about complex financial transactions. And it wasn't, I wouldn't, I don't, it's hard to say it was anything, there was anything specific about it. It was a big, messy, complicated case with lots of different, with facts that you had to develop and narratives you had to develop, and and making sure that you could, show that the other side was making stuff up or exaggerating, things like that. So part of what's fun about trial is that narrative. And trial is about, it's about narratives and themes, and making sure you have a hopefully compelling story for the jury or the judge, whoever's making a decision. And so I just find that really interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. What advice would you give anyone wanting to pursue a similar career path as you?
It depends. I think you need to be realistic about what you want if you want to be a lawyer. There are lots of different things you can do in the law. It's very rewarding. I don't think you should go into the law as a fallback. I don't know how true this is now. I mean, there were definitely folks in my law school classes who were there because they didn't know what else to do. And there were other folks there who thought it would be a good, safe job to get, and it would be, they could make a good living. And it's true, you can. But it's a pretty good size investment, both economically and emotionally, to go to law school and to put the time in, and then to go on and start a career. So it's a real commitment, and you shouldn't do it unless you want to do it. It's my view.
Yeah.
You shouldn't back into it. You shouldn't do it because there's nothing else to do. I do think law school, I will say this, I think law school is can be a great education and a great training ground for lots of things. So if you're going into it knowing that you might use it to get into business or to get into some other field or teaching or whatever, I have no problem with that. I think, but having some intentionality about it in terms of what you're doing is important. And then in terms of building a career, I think it's about trying to find, and part of this is just happenstance. When you graduate, what does the job market look like, right? What is the, and if there are times when lawyers and graduates have choices, and there are times when they don't. And it's like many other fields where there are where there are times when lawyers are desperate to find any job, and then there are times when firms are desperate to hire any warm body.
Yeah.
And so with that, putting that aside, I think it's good to find, or try and find, if what you want to do is build a practice and build a career around it, is find a place that you feel comfortable at. I'm a little bit odd. I've been at the same firm my entire career. That's unusual in this day and age. It's, we actually have what I call lifers. We have several lifers, and it's not that there aren't lifers at other firms in town, but it's become more and more unusual. it's more and more unusual in every business for people to stay put. And law has not been any different than that. And so it's, it's when I interviewed for my job at my firm, I really wanted to get a sense of not what it was like to be a beginning lawyer. I wanted to get a sense of what it's going to be like in 5 years and 10 years. What's the opportunity here? What is this? Could I see myself here for my career?
Mm-hmm.
You never know what's going to happen. But that was my intention, and obviously I've made that intention come true. But I also have partners who I've practiced with for many years, who then decided to go and do different things, not because it wasn't their intention to be at the firm even longer. It's just sometimes things change. We have not had a history in my firm of people who are just showing up and thinking they'll be there for a couple of years. That hasn't been our model, and we typically, when we're looking to bring people on, we're looking for people who want to do what we do with us for the long term.
Yeah.
So it's a personality driven decision, not a numbers driven decision. So,
well, thank you. That was very insightful. I have some questions so that our listeners can get to know you a little better.
sure.
So who's your favorite musician?
I don't know that I have one favorite musician.
Or you can name a few.
I like rock and roll, mostly classic rock and roll.
Mhm.
But everything from the Grateful Dead to Led Zeppelin to the Rolling Stones to the
Yeah,
Beatles.
Rolling Stones poster back there.
Pretty old school tastes in that regard.
No, yeah, that's awesome. And what is your favorite movie?
Shawshank Redemption.
That's a really good one. And what is a show that you just love to like binge watch? Like you can just turn it on and turn your mind off.
I'm not a big TV binge watcher. So what I binge watch is like Sports Center.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. It has been so interesting to learn more about you and what you do, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
You're welcome.
Again, a big thank you to Stephen Wilker, and make sure to follow Talk Law on Instagram at Talk Law Podcast and shoot us an email at talklawpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you.